Does anyone else out there just dread hiring? Do you wonder how to pick good candidates better the first time? Well, my guest today used to answer yes to both of those questions, but then he figured out a better way to hire and formed a company to help others do the same thing. And today he's going to shed some light on what they do differently and tell you generally what he thinks. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that usually what they want, but care is better when the provider owns the practice, because that's when they're going to have the most freedom to make the clinical decisions they think are best. It's not the same when somebody else owns the practice. Usually, eventually, their agenda starts to creep in, and now the provider's got something more to think about. Let's just keep it easier, keep it all private and privately owned, and they don't have to deal with that to begin with. My guest today is Dr. Michael Neal. Michael is a practicing optometrist alongside his wife, Dr. Amy Neal, and together they founded Lakeside Vision in picturesque Hawley, Pennsylvania. They're celebrating their 20th year of servicing Northeast Pennsylvania, and Dr. Michael Neal is also the CEO at Build My Team. He's the face of the company, having founded it as a result of his own practice's hiring struggles. In his downtime, he spends time with Amy, their two boys, and two dogs. Both Doctors Neal have recently taken up running and even run when not being chased. That's something else. Thanks for coming on Practice Care.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carl, for having me.
So the old joke about you don't have to outrun me, just the bear, or no, not the bear, just me. I got that backwards.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's helpful.
Yeah, if you can run faster, that's a good reason to take up running again. I'm
You
glad we
betcha.
have you here. I in a prior corporate life I had to hire, and the best we got was to be honest about how we were hiring strangers and how do you do that well. And I
Yep.
don't know that we ever got it that well. So I've been looking forward to this one. Before we get to that, though, I want to start with you where I start with each and every guest. The bio I just read was short. That's what I asked for. Tell us more about you. Fill in some of the gaps so we can get to know you a bit better.
You betcha. So I've been in practice since 2000. And in an eye care practice, a lot of your listeners aren't going to be eye doctors. So what the heck do I have to tell them that will, help their lives? And the fact of the matter is, a private practice in one type of healthcare is virtually identical to a private practice in another type of healthcare. We all struggle with the same things. You walk in the front door, you hope to heck your secretary's there, all those types of things. And since I've been doing this for quite a while, I've experienced all the issues that you can possibly imagine, from, well, through to embezzlement, you name it. And about 2017, I decided that we just have to do things differently. We literally have to think about things differently and find out how other people, other successful businesses are hiring, because we had every conceivable problem. And that was the start of what I didn't know at the time was Build My Team. We started off by looking at how different companies did it and modeling after that level of success. So that's basically where I got started with this, and a little bit about it.
Great. And so let's jump in. I mean, when it comes to staffing the practice, what are some of the biggest challenges? I mean, everybody can anybody who's got staff and listening right now is just, well, I could answer that. I mean, we could all answer it, but what do you see?
Well, I wear two hats. So I see what what every listener to your podcast has to see. They're walking in the morning and hoping everybody's there, and wondering on a Sunday night who's calling out on Monday, and all those types of things. And the way that the practice used to be is we used to hire using resumes, and that was the best that we could do. But good grief, did it stink. I mean, if you're running a practice or working in your own practice, oh goodness, it's awful. And the thing is, the resume just doesn't tell you what a person's good at. So
right,
we turn this around, and the other hat that I wear is as the CEO and the founder of Build My Team. And so Build My Team is a company that will find outstanding candidates for practices. And it does so based upon a completely different approach. This is new. We don't use resumes. We use assessments. And we have a terrific screening process that's designed to find the A players, the winners, essentially, out of all of the candidates that apply for the job. And to give you an example of how effective it is, we reject about 97% of people. My
Wow.
operations manager told me yesterday that equal statistic, 90%, 97% of the people we asked to show up for an interview did last month, in the month of November. Yep, we hit 97%.
Yeah,
And
so people don't always show up is really the.
oh, that's an unbelievably high number.
So maybe I'm the only
Virtually,
one. Every listener's going, of course, Carl, but I'm like, wow, really?
yeah,
That's a thing.
virtually everybody who is hiring nowadays, one of the biggest struggles is you put in all of this work and effort, and the person doesn't show up. You
Hmm.
pull your hair out for these types of things.
Hmm.
Um, so again, going back to the two hat concept here, Build My Team does the hiring for our practice, and what it's doing differently is not using resumes for hiring.
Okay.
So we start off by looking at what is a person actually good at, and that's done through psychometric assessments.
Okay.
So before a person, as soon as they apply, what the process is and this any listener can do this themselves. We write the job description to elicit a certain type of person that we're looking for. We want folks who are of the healthcare mindset, who are attracted to helping people, who want to come in and contribute. They actually want to give and enjoy helping people at work. And what I would ask your listeners to do is take a look at their job descriptions, and if they don't reflect that, that's step number one in
Mm,
attracting the type of people that you want. Uh,
okay.
the other side of it is with the assessments and the process. Build My Team will write the job description for a practice. The reason that our team does that is it helps the practice learn very, very quickly. So what I mean by that is our team members may have hired 4 or 5 people by lunch. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like it's a different approach than, let's say, a practice is doing this a couple of times a year.
Right.
So they benefit from the help with that. Um, Once the job description is written, then it goes out to over 20 different job boards. And boy, oh boy, that's a real challenge on the private practice side of things to do yourself, because it just takes an eternity to get these things sent out. We have software that automates it. And the reason being is, without a large number of candidates, you're simply not going to find those A players. You need to find a needle in a big old stack of needles. And with when candidates start to apply, here's the other issue that's very challenging on the private practice side. They hit the button on one of the job sites. Um, our software will send them a text within 5 seconds. Their phone buzzes right away.
Hmm.
Reason being, and here's where it becomes very frustrating, candidates have already moved on to the next job.
Mm,
That's how fast you can apply for these sites, on these sites, I should say. So we have to get them while they're actually still paying attention to the job that they're
yeah.
applying for. And on the doctor side of things and practice manager side of things, you got to scratch your head and say, what kind of world are we living in here? Well, um, about a month ago, somebody had sent me this website. It's an AI website that allows you to, believe it or not, apply for 5,000 jobs with a couple button clicks.
I mean, it's that's what I can think of as silly. It's like you can't reply
Yeah.
to that. It's just dumb.
Well, it's ridiculous, right? But this is the environment that we're all in on the hiring side nowadays.
Yeah.
So, if you're asking yourself as a doc, how the heck am I supposed to make heads or tails of this situation? Um, my suggestion is the answer is you need a little bit of help, some
Yeah.
professional assistance with this.
But let me take a step back a bit because you talked about a couple of sort of the underlying, I'll call them the underlying drivers. One is,
Yeah.
to make sure the job description reflects the characteristics and personality of the person that you'd like. It
Hmm.
matters less how fast they can type. It matters more, are they giving, caring people? That's one example. I like
Yeah.
that. And let's just go with that for a second because I want to dig into that a bit. So you're talking about, hiring based on, assessments versus resumes. This is language
Right.
that you gave me before we start talking. So tell me some of the results of that, because it sounds great, but some people are already on board who are listening. Others are like, let me just hear some more. So What are some some results that you see from that?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people, the majority of folks, a little over 50%, don't want to take the assessments. That's one of the
Mm.
first things we hear from folks when we're talking about what if they don't want to take them? Terrific.
Yeah.
That's the whole point,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's a
You're one of 5,000 in the last 18 seconds. That's a benefit.
yeah, exactly. You got to think a little bit differently in this situation, and the simple reason being, if they don't want to take the assessments, great, they're out of our funnel.
Hmm.
Where they're no longer, we gently exit them from our hiring process.
Hmm.
And the reason being is if they're not willing to do a little bit of work to work with you, then what the heck? You got to move on. These people are they're boat anchors in your practice. So
Hmm.
we have to. Our job is to stop them from ever getting to your desk, essentially, and that's what one of the huge advantages of our process. It doesn't allow them to ever waste any time.
Hmm.
So the the next thing that essentially comes of this is that we take the people who have made it through the initial process and applied. They run through a healthcare mindset, so we can define who it is we're looking for, and we have a whole mindset filter
Oh,
based on that.
okay.
The next thing, which is very hard to do yourself, but we measure their speed of learning. These are folks who they fit a sweet spot essentially. If they're
Okay.
too smart, they don't generally work out in healthcare. What I mean by that is they're going to get bored in the health in a healthcare practice.
Hmm.
If they're not, if they don't learn fast enough, well, we've all hired those folks,
Yeah.
and you're going to spend a unbelievable amount of time teaching them on a Tuesday what you went through on a Monday.
Yeah.
And guess what we're doing Wednesday, everybody?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't work out. No surprises there.
Yeah.
So you need folks who fit a sweet spot for how quickly they learn. And when they are in that sweet spot, they not only learn unbelievably quickly, but they stay in the practice. And that's a really important point. Um, our process does, and this is where we got to think differently.
Mhm.
It doesn't require experience.
Mm.
We're not looking for experience. What we're looking for is somebody who has the natural strengths and talents to do the job.
Mhm.
This is critical. If they possess those natural strengths and talents, then they show up every morning and they just excel. That's what they do
And they're smart enough
because
to
it's
learn. You screen for that too.
exactly, it's
Yeah.
not hard for them. So they're
Hmm.
not only smart enough to learn the position very quickly, they're naturally talented for the position. And we have all kinds of algorithms that define each position separately. So it
Hmm.
doesn't matter what type of healthcare you're in. A biller is a biller across healthcare. A front desk person is a front desk person. Sometimes there are high volume practices, sometimes there are low volume practices, and all those things get tweaked.
Okay.
But once we've measured their speed of learning, the next thing we're looking for, there's a whole bunch of characteristics. We have pages of information on the person by the time they're done.
Mm.
And even though these assessments are very quick, that's how much they provide about each person. So, for example, here's a question for your listeners. Do you want somebody sitting at a front desk in a high volume practice that can't handle stress?
Probably not.
Of course.
Yeah.
We measured that. Do you want somebody who's warm and friendly with patients at front desk, or do you want somebody who's a little bit more cool and reserved with somebody?
Right.
Well, most practices would say they want the warm, fuzzy hug type person.
Hmm.
What if you're a medical biller? That's not going to work for you. That'll
Hmm.
work against you. So these are things we measure, and they help us. That old saying, we need to get the right people on the bus,
Hmm.
and then we need to get them in the right seats on the bus.
Hmm.
So one of the things I've experienced in our practice is that about half, believe it or not, about half of people who apply for job A
Hmm.
don't get job A. They get put into job B. We move
Hmm.
them because they're a better fit for that position.
Hmm.
And I don't know of a way to determine that type of outcome from a resume.
You can't because you're not even
Uh,
asking that question.
you're
It would have to
you're not playing
stumble
the same
upon you by
game.
accident. Yeah. By
Yeah,
one day. Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
usually what happens is you learn it the hard way after 3 to 6 months, and then you've wasted,
Yeah.
if the person's still there, you've just wasted all. It's so hard to optimize a practice when you've got people moving from seat to seat to seat on the bus while the bus is moving, you know?
Right.
So after we've determined all these characteristics about the person, then the next thing we do is a video interview. And that's where we're hitting 97% of people completing the video interview. It's spectacular. Why a video interview? Well, simply put, the assessment process gives us a certain outcome, and analyzing the person via video is a completely different outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do is make sure they match.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that, it doesn't matter what the person looks like. It doesn't matter if they have green hair, purple hair. None of that stuff makes any difference whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
What we're looking at is to determine how they're answering the questions. Not so much their answer, but how they answer the questions.
Yeah.
Are these confident people? Are they quiet and meek? Are they, well, each
And that's just
of
you,
these,
the interviewer, sort of observing in real time and
yeah,
assessing
our
in real
team
time.
does that.
Okay.
It's not a real-time interview. There's a whole process behind this, but our team does this, and they've done this a gazillion times.
Yeah.
So, or again, this is algorithmic. So for certain positions, what might be a strength for position A would be a weakness for position B,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. So it all depends. The end result, keep in mind, for a practice, they start off with a discussion with our team members about the type of person that they're looking to hire.
Mm-hmm.
That's all streamlined into the job description. We post it. We get all these candidates. We sort through the candidates through screenings. And then at the end, we send over the best couple candidates to the practice. The entire time involvement for a practice from start to finish for most practices is under an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So you get these couple candidates that are A players.
You mean by the time, so if I was the practice owner, by the time I'm brought into the process, it's about an hour for me because you've done all this stuff before then.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you meant? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get people sitting in front of you to interview that are A players in about an hour's worth of work. And for I know on my side of things, I will avoid at virtually all costs looking at the stacks of resumes, or even worse, what happens if you don't have a stack of resumes? What if you got a couple of them and they all suck?
Mm-hmm.
Not to be disrespectful, but this happens all the time.
Yeah.
And it's learned helplessness. Like no matter what happens, you can't seem to win.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And on doctors' sides of things, we love winning. We love walking in, being the hero to a patient, walking into the next patient, being a hero. I mean, that's one of the things that we all really enjoy. So from a hiring standpoint, it is exceptionally the opposite experience for most doctors. And that's where our company comes in.
So give us the before and after for Lakeside Vision, your practice. Before you started doing it this way, hiring looked like that. Not that the hire, but the staffing experience looked like this, and now that we've changed things, it looks like that.
Yeah, this is a story that some people find challenging to believe. They think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. Quite candid about that. In about 2018, we essentially went through the process of using the assessments and the build my team process, and we started restaffing the practice. We had 14 people at the time before we started. We kept 2, believe it or not. And over the course of approximately 3 years, I think right smack dab through the middle of COVID and all that misery, we scaled down to 10. Now, this is where it gets challenging to believe. Our net income went up dramatically, over double. Think about that for a second. We dropped 4 people, net income over doubled.
Mm-hmm. And that's not, the net income doubling is not entirely because of the 4.
That's a small fraction of it. Our gross income went up dramatically.
Got it.
Our days of the week went down from 5 point something, whatever that fraction was, down to 4 and 1 Saturday a month.
Wow.
The stress in the office, especially from myself and my wife's standpoint, who's the other doc in the practice, plummeted. Absolutely plummeted. I mean, we enjoy going to work now. the thing was, without intentionally doing it, we were the cause of the problems because we were hiring people not based upon future performance so much as based upon trying to help the wounded puppies in the world. Okay, we were
What do you
trying to
mean?
help we we would, as doctors, you want to help people,
Okay.
right? So you're interviewing somebody who says, "Yeah, I can do this. I can be great at it. I can." Well, here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. If you want to be approach us from a performance standpoint, the person who's telling you all those things is almost always desperate. They are looking for anything to get a stable paycheck because
Hmm.
healthcare is a stable system. Everybody knows that.
Hmm.
They want an inside job. They don't want, for example, we hired a person from, she worked at a deli. She didn't want ham thrown at her anymore,
Fair enough.
deli meat thrown
Yeah.
at her. I mean, I don't know about you, Carl, but I don't like it when anybody throws deli meat at me any more than the next person,
I'm going to
right?
project and say I wouldn't like it.
Exactly.
Thankfully,
Yeah.
it hasn't, but I'll go
Yeah.
there.
So there's all kinds of people who are coming from different walks of life that have these strengths and talents where they look at healthcare and say, this is fantastic. I'm not working outside in the rain or the cold. I'm not doing X. I'm not doing Y. So what if people get mad at me sometimes, or get upset? Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
This is a great gig. And our job at Build My Team is to find those people. And that's one of the things that we've been able to do. And that's what the company did for our practice.
Yeah. So give me the after. So you have 10 people, fewer days, doubling income because you had A players. You had A players in the right seats on the bus.
Yeah. And now, so for example, there's a couple of things. Like today, I was able to do what I wanted for the day. I was able to work out, ran 8 miles on the treadmill. I've got a coach. I run multiple days, like 6 days a week. And why am I telling you this? It doesn't matter about running. That doesn't matter one bit.
Hmm.
What matters is I've got the free time to pursue a hobby that I love.
Hmm.
We've got kids. Spend a tremendous amount of time with kids. What I'm not doing is taking charts home.
Hmm.
I haven't done that in years. Now, granted, even though they're electronic, we don't do any of that stuff. Our team does it. We have a team member in the practice who does virtually everything. It's their job, it's their responsibility. They own it.
Hmm.
And so by doing that, by getting these team members that own these various different responsibilities and processes, on the doctor side of things, we don't have to do that anymore. And they're better at it than I'll ever be
Yeah.
because they were brought in. I'm the wrong person. I'm in the wrong seat on the bus to do most of the roles within the practice. Um, but yet on the doctor side of things, we do this all the time.
Hmm.
If you want to really level up in 2023 or 2024, I should say, the key thing I would give your listeners is do less. As a doctor, try your absolute best to master the art of delegation to your
Hmm.
team members. And if they aren't the right team members or you need more team members, give us a call. We'll get the right people on your bus.
Hmm. And
But
when you're talking to a client, do you talk to them at all about what's your culture like? Like, because, and the reason I ask it is not so that you can bake it into hiring, but if I mean, any organization, healthcare or otherwise, can have just, just be a horrible place to work. There could be things that get in the way of keeping good people. I imagine that's in place at your practice as well. But do you screen for, like, do you ever say, look, I don't think we can help you because the people we send aren't going to stay, or do you have a screening process that way, like requirements for clients?
well, as you can imagine, since we are an assessment type company, our clients don't have to do any assessments, obviously. There've been a handful of people we can't help.
Mm,
And that's simply because the doctor, we weren't able to help them because they didn't want to be helped.
right.
We all have patients like that. I mean, docs are
Hmm.
human too, so it's rare, thankfully. But when a doc or practice calls us up, they do it via booking a sales consultation. It's a free consultation, and the purpose of it is twofold. One, our team member will discuss with the practice and find out what they're trying to do. So most practices want to hire let's say one or two, maybe three people, but
Mhm.
they have a whole bunch of different roles. So let's say you want to hire one person. Well, they want that person to be able to do different things. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe in the old days, but now you put up a job description like that and nobody applies. So
Yeah.
what our team does is they get this whittled down to one and a half maybe ish type job roles. Everybody in healthcare needs a backup thing to do when
Yeah.
things slow down. So get that refined and then focus on hiring that person, somebody who makes maximum impact in your practice. Um, by doing that, we're now able to get the a level of focus to the practice, and it's
Okay.
a great start.
That's good. Yeah. And the reason so we have a couple of the culture matters. You can hire the best people, but if the culture is crushing, if there's something else that's crushing, they're not going to stay. Um, because it has to be
Well,
a place where you can actually get work done, you know?
yeah, and that reminds me of another thing. Remember me talk earlier? I mentioned the algorithms. So
Hmm.
in practices, what we're looking for, like our great clients, are brutally honest with us.
Hmm.
Okay, absolutely brutally honest. And there's no judgment on our side. Certain docs are very difficult to work for,
Hmm.
precise, demanding. You know, you're allowed one mistake back in the 80s, but that's it. None for the 90s, none, those types of
Yeah.
things. You know,
The good old
and
days.
what what we're looking for are folks who can be candid about that, because whatever the it all starts with the truth. Whatever your practice is now, be completely blunt and candid. That's ideal.
Hmm.
Then step two, we all know it, you don't want to stay there. That's why we're having the conversation in the first place, right? So then the next step is, where do you want to be?
Hmm.
Well, let's talk about that. If you would like to walk into a practice, like I have the luxury of doing, I don't do anything other than in the exam room.
Hmm.
I don't know how to turn this stuff on. We're not allowed to schedule appointments ourselves. This is not a joke. Well, it
I know
is and
it's
it
fun,
isn't,
but
but
yeah.
I'll be shot dead if I try and schedule an appointment. I don't
Hmm.
know how.
Hmm.
There's so many rules and components to things when you're scheduling an appointment in
Hmm.
a higher volume practice, or I would say a new practice or a modern practice nowadays, that the doc has no idea.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess it just depends on if you really want to stop being on the exercise wheel, running in circles, never getting anywhere, the revolving door, use whatever metaphor you want.
Hmm.
It's entirely possible, but you have to think about things differently.
Yeah. And we've got plenty of episodes in our practice care library about culture, systems, and processes. They kind of go hand in hand. Now, the greatest systems in the world will crash with terrible people. So, what Michael's talking about needs to happen no matter what else happens. But if you want it to be sustainable and have the life of, whatever it is, then you really need more than just that in place. So, check those episodes out. A couple of wrap up questions for you, the
Sure.
same two that I ask every guest. The first is, in the context of what we're talking about, is there anything you think I should have asked you, but just didn't think to ask you?
Hmm. Well, that's a great question. Um, I think I've talked a lot about the solutions and such, as you know, as I see it, wearing both hats, as the day-to-day practice side, plus the way it used to be versus how it is now for me.
Hmm.
What we didn't really talk about is how awful it is. Just the raw emotion behind this. Like, I cannot tell you how horrific it was back in 2017, 2018 in our practice. And it wasn't for the lack of trying. My God, the number of hours we were putting in was mind blowing. There's I can't remember who said it, but the problem we had is we leaned our ladder up against the wrong wall. We
Hmm.
climbed the ladder as fast as we possibly could.
Hmm.
Carl, it was against the wrong wall.
Hmm.
And, that was the issue. So I started studying how the Four Seasons, how these types of companies provide such amazing customer service.
Hmm.
And they were hiring via an upside down pyramid. I mean,
Hmm.
they weren't hiring in a traditional way. They started off with all these assessments, and only when they were certain the person could do the job did they actually come in for an interview.
Yeah.
And I looked at what we were doing and said, well, good Lord, no wonder we're getting the results that we're getting. We're doing it the exact opposite way that these guys do.
Hmm.
So we wanted an outcome that you hear about on podcasts like this, just didn't know how to get it.
Hmm.
And it was crushing. I mean, anybody who's listening right now who's a husband-wife duo, when you have hiring issues at the practice, it's not like it stops at your garage door when you pull the car in at night, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, these are horrific things. So I guess that my answer to the question is you're not alone.
Okay.
Like, you're just not alone with
Yeah.
this. We have a professional team who does this all day long and hires people around North America that are A players. The
Mhm.
difference that an A player can make in a small practice is tremendous. Now, use your imagination and just project. What does that look like when you have a bucket load of these folks in your practice?
Mhm.
What transforms everything? It's a
Yeah.
completely different day-to-day experience. And there's not an hour that goes by where I will ever think positively about a resume again for the rest of my life. That's it.
Love it. Love it. Um, and the other wrap up question I ask is, all right, we've caught a listener's attention. I sure hope we have. And they want to get going. Michael's right. We're doing it wrong. Sometimes, Michael, people get enthusiastic about something, but they're stuck at the starting line. And so, are there one or two maybe super simple things they could do to get off the line and get going? And I like something you said earlier of, take a look at your most recent job description. And if it's devoid of any of the characteristics of the qualities of the person that you just wrote that for, exit out and start over. You know, I'll throw that in the hat or in the ring.
Yep. And I would say, I would answer that question twofold. If you want to have an expert organization take care of this, just in the same way that you would expect somebody you refer to,
Mm-hmm.
on the clinical side, if you want to refer to somebody who just goes in, treats your proverbial patient well, and does a terrific job, that's what we are set up to do. Your patient is the practice, and our job is to go in, staff the practice with A players, and minimize the amount of effort you have to spend. If you're open to that, go to buildmyteam.com, schedule a sales consultation. If
Mm-hmm.
you're not ready for that, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's completely okay. I would say that you take a look at the job description, um, publish it out to as many of the job boards as you can.
Clear a
Ideally,
calendar.
you're having somebody else do this, because it will eat you up time wise.
Yeah.
The amount of time this takes is tremendous. You also have to have multiple accounts, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
So either way works. I mean, our process is guaranteed. I forgot to mention that. So if you want us to handle it for you, terrific.
Okay.
We have guaranteed results with that. Every candidate's guaranteed for 90 days. So if they quit, move, get beamed up by Scotty, it doesn't matter what, we replace them for free.
Got it.
And just again, don't forget, you're not alone in this. This is a problem that's now been solved, and we'd like everybody to be able to go home, go to their families with a big, go home with their families, a big smile on their face. Daddy's home, mommy's home,
Right.
and not have to bring that psychological work home with you.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And thanks for shedding some light on this. It's anybody with staff has faced it one way, or you will if you haven't yet. You will. So thank you for coming on and shedding some light on this onto practice care. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Carl.
Yes, and you supplied some contact information to us. We're going to get that into the show notes for this episode. Anyone who's curious about Michael or Build My Team, that's another way to get a hold of them. A couple things before we wrap up. First, if you are someone like Michael or I and you serve private practice owners, or at the same time, if you're like Michael and you're also a private practice owner, either way, if you've got some business experience for the business or some experience with the business side of private practice, we want you to come on Practice Care and tell everyone about it. In the show notes for Michael's episode and every episode, there's a link, couple of clicks, tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, please subscribe to Practice Care. We do a new episode every week, and the easiest and best way to stay up to date with them is to subscribe, because then when new episodes publish, you'll be notified right away. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, pretty much everywhere. We're there. Subscribe so you can keep up to date. Thanks very much, and until next time.